everybody. Okay, my name is Robert Richmond with the Austin Police Department's Organized Crime Division, ROBERTRICHMAN, and I'm a lieutenant with our Organized Crime Division. On Wednesday, July 12th, around 11 p.m., interdiction officers stopped a green 2013 Dodge Avenger that was traveling the 5400 block of I-35 northbound. They stopped this vehicle for speeding, and when officers made contact with the driver, they started noticing that there was some suspicious behavior. She was acting really nervous. She was her stories of where she was traveling to and coming from was very contradictory. So we did an open air sniff with Emma, our canine, who gave a positive indication that there was narcotics in the vehicle. So with further search, officers found 75 pounds of liquid methamphetamine that were secreted in bottles, these 5-gallon jugs of degreaser. So that obviously the degreaser was out of the bottles and there was methamphetamine in it. We ended up arresting Celine Lizeth Ayala, she's a 23-year-old female from Laredo, Texas. Earlier we gave a press release that it said Lisbeth was her last name. It's actually Lizeth. So Celine Lizeth Ayala. We had, with that seizure, with those 5-gallon containers full of crystal methamphetamine, or I'm sorry, liquid methamphetamine, it's about 34,000 grams. Has a street value of close to $2 million. With this, we're charged her federally with conspiracy to possess with intent to deliver a controlled substance, and actually she could face up to 20 years in the federal penitentiary after that. Anybody have any questions?
So these were interdiction officers. Can you explain for us what interdiction officers are?
Absolutely. These are specially trained officers that we have that work the highway. And the Criminal Interdiction Unit, they work the highway, they also work other areas around the city. And they're trained to look for these indicators of deception and indicators that just suspicious things of vehicles. The cartel uses many different kind of means to get drugs back and forth all the way through Texas. So when they make those stops, they ask questions, questions that are pretty mundane every day. But they are really listening closely to what the responses are. And during the response, a lot of times they'll ask just normal questions. And any one of us who are just normally traveling, you know where you're going to, you know where you're coming from. Most of us, sure, you'd be a little bit nervous, but you can answer pretty much everything. So a lot of times these things will pop up and they look for these indicators, and it just goes from there.
Were these officers looking for this woman specifically?
No, actually this is what we call a cold stop. They basically just stop the car for speeding.
Yeah, and I guess, and last question about this one topic, it was mentioned that she was going 5 miles over on I-35. I assume that probably wasn't the only indicator, because lots of people go 5 miles over on I-35. What were some other indicators that led them to pull her over?
Sure, there's some other things that we look at too, the way that the car is. A lot of times there's also some information that we're able to receive about what where the car has been traveling and things of that sort that we're able to look at as we travel down the road. So, I mean, 5 miles an hour over is still 5 miles an hour over. And so when they're looking for these different things, the nervousness of the driver, these are the same things that we train regular patrol officers and looking for criminals that are like maybe involved in burglaries and things of that sort, stolen vehicles. A lot of times when people are involved in those kind of things, they start making these nervous mistakes like changing lanes and other things without using turn signals and all that kind of stuff. So it's the totality of all that behavior that they use, and of course with speeding too, that's what they use for the probable cause in this stuff.
Has there been much investigation into the origin of the drugs?
It's really hard to tell exactly where they came from. We know that they originated from the Laredo area. So somewhere along the border is where they came up from. So, it's really hard to tell. Most of the liquid meth that's coming in is actually coming in from Mexico and being smuggled over by the cartel. So when it makes it this side and it ends up going into couriers, which we consider Miss Ayala. So as she was bringing it up north and that sort, it's really hard to actually pin it down to one specific area that it came from.
Any indication of where her final destination was? If those drugs were going to be distributed here in Austin, or maybe she was headed to Dallas?
What we got from her, a lot of the times the information that comes out isn't exactly truthful. So the investigation is still continuing, of course, because we start to try to link those other things. Obviously, because organized crime's involved, and we work with multiple agencies. Really, any law enforcement agency that has the same goal as we do to get these drugs off the street. So when we start putting those things together, if it becomes part of the larger investigation, we really don't have that exact destination of where it was to, because obviously with all of that, that's what got her in trouble to begin with, is the untruthful statements. So we really don't know exactly where they were going.
What was her story? Was she going to visit her cousin, or what did she
Well,
say?
she had multiple stories, and that one, she didn't know what exactly her destination was. She changed it multiple times, and those are the indicators that the officers are looking for, and it's saying, hey, this doesn't seem to make sense. Things aren't working out all that well, and so they look a little further. That's why they're trained to look into all of those indicators.
So those bottles, were they just sitting in her back seat, or where did you find them? Any attempts to hide them?
Well, it's real hard to hide those from the dog because obviously the dog is smelling them, and so at the very first part, I have some pictures that I'll show you here later too, where there was some in the trunk and there was also one in the back seat as well.
Can you speak at all to just on the scale of drug trafficking, how big I-35 is when it comes to moving narcotics from Mexico north? I mean, it seems kind of like Austin is the last stop before you would get to Dallas or something like that.
Because we're centrally located, in essence, we are right in the middle there, especially when it comes to Texas in particular. There is a lot of drugs that are going up and back and forth and all over the place when it comes to coming out of the border areas. So a lot of them end up going Houston, San Antonio, you name it. If there's a need for drugs, if there's a demand for drugs on the black market, that's where they're going to. 35, obviously, because there's thousands and thousands of cars that pass through I-35 every day. It's obviously a great corridor for them to use. We can't stop everybody. We don't have enough officers to stop everybody. There were some statistics that came out several years ago that just kind of, they estimated that we probably catch less than 1% of the drugs that are coming across if you look at the sheer quantities out there. Now, those are more hyperbole type statistics. They're not real solid. But with that estimate, if you think all the drugs that are out on the street, for the cars that we miss, here we get 75 pounds in just one car. We've had multiple seizures. We've had a gas tank less than a year ago. We had one that was a gas tank that was full of it too, and I think there was 250 pounds in that one.
That's not to say how big of a quantity is this, how bad of a hit is that for the cartel? Like 75 pounds.
It's hard to tell. I mean, if when you see just the sheer quantity that's coming across, it's that supply and demand. And without us knowing exactly how much is coming across the border, there could be thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of that stuff being made up.
Was she alone in the car?
No, there was a passenger in the car. We're not going to release her name. There was a passenger. She was released. We figured out that she was not involved in it, that she had no knowledge of what was being transported in the car.
Is it correct that her 4-year-old daughter was also in the car with her?
No, there was no children in the car.
Okay.
How do young people get roped into this? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Money.
You guys can
If you think about it, it's an easy way to make money. You go out there and you transport something and you bring it from one area to another and get paid for it. I mean, I think greed and also, chasing whatever destination they have for their goals in life. And so money, obviously, is a big way to get roped into it. There's lots of different things out there, and, we have so many different problems with human trafficking, drug trafficking, and all those other things. I think each individual has their own story.
20 years in the federal pen, though, I think there's something to be said for maybe you should find another job.
Yeah, it's definitely not worth looking over your shoulder when you look at what the consequences are. I think most important, a lot of people forget, it's not just the time that those individuals spend, it's when that stuff makes it to the street. When you have that methamphetamine, I can't think of a thing that methamphetamine has not touched and destroyed. So if you look at the lives that have been shattered because of this drug, it's not just about a drug being transported for somebody just to have a good time and have fun. Methamphetamine is incredibly addictive. It causes all kinds of problems. We've seen multiple deaths across the United States from this drug. You guys can just Google any time and look at all the damage that drug has caused in our society. So I think that's what's probably the biggest thing to really kind of latch onto out of this. It's not just going to be your freedom. It's actually somebody else's life that's being affected. And when we talk everybody, children, the economy, all of that, our healthcare system, all of it's being impacted by the drugs.
One more question.
Is there any indication that she was being forced against her own will?
Just
All right.
the two.
Did she have a record?
No, we don't have any indication she had a previous criminal history.
One more.
Any indication she was being forced to transport these drugs against, out of fear of her life or anything like that?
No, we don't have anything to believe that she wasn't a total voluntary participant in this.
Can I ask one more quick thing? Did you work with Williamson County on this? Is this their jurisdiction or yours?
This is our jurisdiction, so
This was right up at Capitol Plaza, right?
Right,
Okay.
5400 block, it's just right across from Capitol Plaza, there, northbound.
How big is a $2 million bust in the scope of seizures that the department makes?
The $2 million street value bust, when you really look at the size of it, it's a pretty good size. It's a pretty good quantity of narcotics. But recently, we've been seizing a large amount of narcotics and, of course, money that's also related to those narcotics. So it's kind of on par for what we've had this year, where we've had $1-2 million seizures. But this one's up there. This is pretty high.
Thank you.
Any questions?